the DreamWorks movies connected in one big cinematic universe? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but if they are, this is how I think it should look. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to go ahead and take you through my version of the DreamWorks universe. We're going to go all the way from prehistory into the medieval times, all through to the exploration of the world, the Industrial Revolution, three separate alien invasions, the rise of superheroes, the reemergence of fairy tale creatures, all leading up to animals gaining the same rights as humans, as well as eventually taking over the planet, all culminating in what will eventually be the distant future where humans actually need to re-evolve. And I hope you guys will join me on this journey. But today, however, we are going to start from the beginning and go all the way down, probably into the exploration times. So where the DreamWorks universe really kicks off is actually in the ancient times, with the earliest known records we have coming out of the Prince of Egypt. Now, in the Prince of Egypt, we see essentially the story of Moses played out with their rise to freedom. But what's very important about this is that this establishes God and magic as an essential player within the DreamWorks universe. Now, he comes down to the Prince of Egypt, and he's the one who gives Moses the powers and the magic and actually implements the 7 plagues of Egypt throughout this time in the story. But like I said, this is the most important part. This is where this world will diverge from our own and give us a world filled with magic, and that will immediately transfer into the next era. But real quick, I gotta talk about who actually is God in DreamWorks Universe, and I believe he is actually the man in the moon. The little boy we see at the beginning of every single movie, fishing up the story and telling us the tale that we will see. And he will become more of a player as we get further down the line. But for now, I just want you to take in mind that this is God and he has bestowed magic unto the world. This actually brings us into the next era that I would like to call this of the DreamWorks theory. This is the medieval times. This ranges everywhere from Trolls all the way down to Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. And essentially what we see here, the divergence in this is that these are worlds essentially where fairy tales and dragons exist. Like, this is a very modern version of the medieval world where the trolls have actually built an entire culture around singing and dancing and being happy. And we see this in Trolls where they're being oppressed by the Bergens, which are essentially just larger versions of trolls. But, they call them Bergens in that show. And then how music and wonder is brought into the world through the power and the magic of music. And we see this in Trolls World Tour, and more so that we can roll into here in the Trolls Band Together. And that establishes a few things. Like, one, pop songs in this universe existed long before they ever would in our current world, but also just kind of gives you the layout. Like, this is when fairy tales are up to probably their full might. Like, they are in the world, they're controlling it. There aren't really any humans rolling around at this point, at least none that we see. And they're just kind of working out the world together. This is a very new world, and magic is sort of just taken over and just shaped this world into whatever it seems to be fit, or whatever the dominant player in this world sees fit at the moment in time. But Trolls rolls us really well into How to Train Your Dragon, How to Train Your 2, and How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, where we finally see humans make their first appearance. And what are they doing? They're actually in a war with the dragons. Now, dragons are magical creatures. They're fairy tale creatures. And for as long as the Vikings could remember, they have been fighting against the dragons. And we see that play out, and we get this backstory in How to Train Your Dragon. But where the shift happens is Hiccup befriends Toothless. So now you have humans befriending fairy tale creatures. But through Hiccup's friendship with Toothless, they actually change how their entire society is going. And all the way to the point where dragons just become a part of their society and their fight to defend it. And his fight to save all of the dragons and bring them back and give them a safe place where humans and dragons can coexist peacefully. And that all culminates in Dragons to the Hidden World, where the rest of the world is still trying to fight and trap and enslave the dragons. But there's only one place, the citizens of Berk, that have stood up and are trying to protect them. But eventually, the fairy tale creatures do all go away. And it actually starts with the dragons, with all of them going and hiding out in the hidden world. Except for possibly one dragon, which we see in Shrek. Now, in Shrek, the rest of the fairy tale creatures and the humans are kind of butting heads, but not really. We kind of see where, in the beginning, they've kind of there's still a solid separation, but there are more of them just working together with the people. But we do see that they are being rounded up, whereas humans and fairy tale creatures are still butting heads more so than just with the dragons. Now, in Shrek, we do see possibly the last dragon and her eventual dronkies, which is a scary thing to think about in itself. But through Shrek, Shrek 2, Shrek the Third, Shrek Forever After, we do start to see hints of acceptance for the fairy tale creatures. But there is also still things that are out to get them. There are still evil creatures out there. We see that with Rumpelstiltskin. He is trying to manipulate and change the world. But since magic and humans have all kind of worked in with one another, it's just a normal part of their society. And because of that, their society has actually accelerated, where you have things like modern restaurants and modern thought processes going on, even as far back as the medieval times. But eventually, though, all of this will have to come to an end. And I don't really know what brings this in. I think what it honestly is even though in places like Burke and far, far away, the fairy tale creatures, the humans, and the animals with magic are still kind of friends, but only in these places. I think what it really is throughout the rest of the world, and we see more of the world in Puss in Boots and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, humans are still trying to basically just take advantage of and use like fairy tales, creatures, and their magic, and going head to head against them. We see that with Little Jack Horner, who's basically just made an entire collection of fairy tale items and magic items that he just uses willy-nilly to attack everything else and get his way and build his empire. And I think what this actually had to cause is fairy tale creatures like trolls and ogres and dragons and all of these things actually ended up having to go into hiding to basically protect themselves from the humans. But here's the thing, humans still have magic as well. And humans and fairy tale creatures probably have, like, as weird as this is going to sound, like interbred. And we do see that in Shrek with the fairy godmother. She has a son. Her son is completely human in Prince Charming. Like, he is a human, but his mother was a fairy tale creature, technically, as she is the fairy. But with the rest of them going into hiding, at least the ones that look so much different from normal humans that they can't just integrate into society, they've probably went into hiding, and they will stay in hiding for a respectable amount of time. But we'll get to that in future videos, because before we do that, the next era we're going to actually explore here is ironically the exploration era. And this is a bit of a time jump from the medieval times, because now you're up to, like, I don't know, I'd say like the colonial period. And we see that with these exploration. We see Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas, where he's basically a pirate. And then we can see this in The Road to El Dorado, where they discover America, as well as in Spirit Untamed, which is kind of like the Wild West, I would say, in America. So I might have put this a little early on the list, but I think it just fits in here really well, as we're still exploring out west, and the wilds of the United States haven't fully been tamed just yet. But we can definitely see in all three of these that magic is still around. In Sinbad, his main antagonist is the goddess of discord and chaos in Eris. And his whole objective in this movie is A, to clear his name, B, save his best friend, C, get the girl, because Sinbad gets the girls, and then finally it's to find the Book of Peace. And the Book of Peace is a magic item. And they use this magic item to maintain peace for that city. Now, this is still another example of magic or fairy tale or like god level creatures, like things that aren't human, going up against humans ultimately. So we can see in Sinbad that even though they've went into hiding for the most part, when humans and magical creatures come together, bad things do tend to happen. It's really violent and not that great. We can even see this in Road to El Dorado, where even humans that can use magic are considered to be shamans, or like the witch doctor, the main bad guy of that show, which I don't really remember his name either at this current moment. But he can actually use magic. And he is going up against the chief, who cannot use magic. And they're worshiping these guys who they think are gods, and they're kind of just faking it till they make it when it comes to them using magic, which I think a volcano goes off and it makes them think, oh, these are gods. But the other thing we do see in El Dorado is they have different looking animals than what you would see in anywhere else, really. And they are very different looking than the average run-of-the-mill animals. So they're probably unique to El Dorado because there is still magic in El Dorado. And they didn't have to go into hiding. They were living in kind of harmony. But ultimately, they also do trash the entrance to El Dorado, so it can never be found again. Then moving on to Spirit Untamed. So now we have humans that can use magic that are getting suppressed. Fairy tale creatures that are getting suppressed. But we also see that magic is still running through the land in the animal life. And animals are way more intelligent than what we would have given them credit for, especially when it comes to like the stallion's spirit, and his heart, his spirit, and his guide, and his friendship with this young girl. And we see all of this in Spirit Untamed, but we see he's actually having to deal with horse wranglers. So people are suppressing animals now. Animals in the medieval times could talk, and they were very intelligent. Everyone knew that, and the magic allowed them to communicate that with us. But we see that as we've moved into these other movies, that they have basically kind of either dumbed themselves down or just been dumbed down due to the suppression by humans. Humans realize, okay, we can't handle the magical creatures, but we can handle like a talking donkey. He is fully able to be a talking donkey. And if he has babies with a regular donkey, the babies don't talk. They might still have the intelligence and they might still have the genetics and the ability to talk, but they aren't. So the humans have now fully started in Spirit Untamed, I believe, to have started their suppression of the animals in the animal kingdom. So we get into the industrial era. Now here we have the events of Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget, and Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Now, what we see here, though, is the further suppression of animals by humans. They can tell that these animals are actually fairly intelligent. We see the chickens in Chicken Run and Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget actually trying to actively escape their oppression by humans. And they're doing this because they know they're going to die. And humans have created this entire fortress around just imprisoning these animals to be used for what is essentially nothing but food in Chicken Run. But the animals aren't dumb. We see that they have retained that intelligence that they gained from their fairy tale ancestry and the magic that's rolling through this world. But humans, it's not really seen that humans can understand them yet, so they haven't quite regained the ability to fully speak to humans, but they have regained a lot of their intelligence and their drive and their will to actually not be suppressed anymore. And this is kind of the start we see of animals kind of starting to fight back and push back against humans. And that'll only get more in depth into the modern era in this next section we're about to talk about. But where we really see this come into play to actually kind of kick off this is in Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, where science has actually enabled Wallace to turn into a were-rabbit. So he changes every night after eating these things, just goes out eating the carrots. Now, one, you could look at this as this is just science gone awry. And some of it kind of is. But what I think has happened here is he has used science to activate dormant fairy tale genes. And that does come up further down the line in the video we're going to talk about today. But the ability for humans to activate magic within themselves using technology is something that is very important to remember. So it's not that humans have just completely lost the ability to do magic. It's more like it's just dormant within them. And Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit shows that very well. But it also shows a very intelligent canine. He walks around on two legs. He is established to be, honestly, smarter than his owner. And they work together in a mutual harmony. So this also shows that not all humans are bad. There are some humans that will feel sympathy and friendship and kindness to the animals. And a man and a dog is actually a really good example of this and why. So they would have perfect trust with one another as his owner to Gromit. So we have to remember that this rolls into not all humans are bad within this world, and animals are obviously more intelligent and more driven than we could ever be. And that brings us into a great segue into what is the modern era here in the Dreamworks universe. And we're going to start over what I call the animal uprising of the modern era. So this starts off with Shark Tale and then ultimately culminates in the bad guys. So what we're seeing here is animals are way more intelligent and they are gaining their intelligence back. In Shark Tale, we see that under the water, the fish have an entire society that is a very modern society. And they can probably do this because fish aren't near humans in really any way. So they can adopt some of the human attributes and traits. And we've actually seen that this isn't even something new. The animals and the fairy tale creatures were doing this all the way back in Trolls in the first video, and you should go check that out. So that way you're kind of up to date on this one. And so we see that rolling into their society. The ant society are the same way. They are smaller, they are less detailed with humans, and thus they are more intelligent with the main ant actually being a scientist himself and building things. And the further they are away from humans as well, we see in Flushed Away, where the rats who live in the sewer, so we have a pet rat who is very intelligent, and he just basically runs the house while his owner's not there, but he's a really rich rat. However, he's still living in a cage and everything, so he is still technically being oppressed by his owner to the point where she barely even notices he's any different than any other rat. He can't communicate with. But when they go into the sewer, they have a full-blown society. It's basically a mini Europe down there, and they even have their own Big Ben, or mini UK, sorry, and they even have their own Big Ben. They have their own thing. They watch soccer, and they're using the human areas and the human technology for their own benefit, even collecting it. But the further they are from humans, the more advanced they actually are able to be. Now, where we see the human conflict come back in here, though, is definitely in Over the Hedge. You have some peaceful animals that have been living on their own. They're not dumb by any means, but they're just living and are eking out a life in their little forest until they become surrounded by humans. And then when that happens, they actually take up the fight against the humans themselves and basically just start stealing from them, but also giving themselves a better life by basically stealing and adopting human technology. But you still have humans trying to oppress the animals. But this is where the animals are definitely starting to fight back. Now, where this does kind of throw a little bit of a loophole here is when we move on to Turbo. Now, Turbo is a fun character because he is a snail who, through the use of technology, once again awakens dormant genes, which gives him superpowers. In this case, he is a snail that got super speed. But he wants to outrace and outdo humans. He wants to be essentially a NASCAR, and he actually does succeed in doing this throughout his whole story, but he also befriends humans. He has humans that believe in him. So we still get to see that again, where we have animals who are standing up to humans and showing they can be just as good at what the humans do, though he does admittingly do it through the use of awakened superpowers. But he also has friends who stand behind him and try and give him the best they can. Now, they are still using him for their own benefit. To the humans, he's just a snail they happen to find that has super speed. But they do put their bets on him and put all their hopes in him to achieve what they also want to achieve. And this is a great segue into, okay, so you have some humans are good, some humans are bad. Some humans would rather cheat to beat the snail that can go very fast. But then you also have this snail who just wants to show everybody that he is just as good as the humans. And that carries over from Over the Hedge very well. And it actually rolls right into Madagascar movies very well. So the Madagascar movies go from Madagascar, Madagascar 2, Escape to Africa, Madagascar 3 and Europe's Most Wanted, all the way to the Penguins of Madagascar. In Madagascar, you have a captive zebra who is smart enough to escape his habitat and try and go to give himself kind of a better life, realistically just see the world. He's questioning himself. He's questioning his purpose. And he does manage to escape. We see the humans are still oppressing animals in this way. They are still keeping animals in zoos at this point. And they just kind of are dumbstruck to the fact that these animals are a lot more intelligent than what you would actually see. To us, they are still just dumb animals. But the animals are stepping up. Now, humans can't at this point understand animals yet, but they do see them doing some pretty crazy things. We actually see this in Madagascar 2, Escape to Africa, where the animals actually just stopped the humans who have just taken over their water and their reserve and who have been poaching them and fighting against them this entire time, trying to kidnap their cubs and everything. And they actually fight back, and they do a really good job of winning that particular battle and moving it along. But then where we really see this all come to fruition, though, I believe, is in Madagascar 3, in Europe's Most Wanted, where a group of what is essentially circus animals, they just start running the circus. So now the animals are doing what humans do, and actually doing it arguably better. But even in this show, we still see that there is actually humans that are still trying and attempting to oppress animals, and actually doing a relatively good job of it. Because we do see the hunter animal control lady, she straight up wants a lion's head, even though it makes absolutely no sense for her to want that. But it's still a great example of humans and animals butting heads, where humans are still attempting to stay on top, and certain people are actually doing it a little bit better. So that sentiment has probably been spread all the way throughout. But where we move into the Penguins of Madagascar, we just kind of take humans completely out of the equation, and we see what animals have truly been up to in the background, with animals actually having their own little secret society keeping the world safe. And the penguins, which have been arguably the best militarized thing on the entire universe thus far, have actually teamed up with another group of animals that has all kinds of high-tech technology, and they're very intelligent, and they're going through, and they're keeping humans safe from other bad animals. So it's kind of like them being the police force that are trying to keep these fairy tale genes, these fairy tale creatures, these things and keep all of this stuff on the down low, because some animals probably don't want the humans to know just how intelligent they are, but they do want to keep the world safe so they can continue living. Now, if that means helping humans when they can, it just means helping humans when they can. But what we do see, though, is some animals, with the octopus, is actually smart enough to basically fool humans into basically believing that he is a real human, and he has a business set up and an empire, and he is trying to make all of the penguins who he feels betrayed against because they are cuter than him ugly. And he does this by basically turning them into monsters, which is just another example of using science to activate fairy tale genes and give these things weird powers or freaky appearances, and basically turning the penguins into these weird, messed up versions of fairy tale creatures. But this is still animals and humans being completely separate, butting heads, and in like the physical sense, but not actually, going down to where, okay, we are going to be equals. It's just like these animals are obviously better than humans, and these humans want to keep suppressing animals, but the animals are obviously just as intelligent as they are, but no one is just willing to recognize that. And like I said, very few animals we've witnessed can actually even communicate with humans, with the only exception being that we have seen thus far is actually this octopus. But with that one animal being able to communicate with humans, we can move into the bee movie, where it's actually shown that bees are, once again, way more intelligent. They are way more advanced. Their hives are way more advanced than we see. But where this bee, and Barry B. Benson, actually breaks the rules in is he talks to a human, and the human understands him. So now the animals have developed at this point enough where even the insects can be understood by humans. Now it's very, very like kind of risque as to whether only bees can communicate with humans at this point, but seeing as we just had octopus do it, all the animals now can probably, if they truly wanted to and were truly open with humans, the humans could probably understand them. But that never really comes into fruition, at least at this point. In this movie, we only see the bees communicate. But what does this bee actually do? He just straight up goes, you know what? Legally, you are stealing from us. I'm going to sue you into where you can't use honey anymore and you can't imprison bees anymore. And bees are just given all of their honey. He basically, what he does is he sues and he wins equal rights. And he says, no, we are this, we are sentient, we are them. You are stealing honey from us, so you need to just give us all of our honey back. And then that leads to a fun little scene where, like, the flowers die. They basically cause a near planetary destruction because bees aren't pollinating flowers anymore, which is kind of like a fun thing, but it is in completely shows that, okay, now legally the animals are going to start stepping up and taking humans to court. And we see that he is continuing this process, talking to a cow, and the cow can talk. So now it is assumed that cows can communicate with humans as well. And not only that, he's probably winning. He has a mosquito as a lawyer. And where we can roll this whole thing into very well, I believe, is into Mr. Peabody and Sherman, where a highly hyper intelligent dog, aka a hyper intelligent fairy tale creature, a dog that can speak, and we've seen animals speak throughout this entire time, is now fully communicating with humans. He is considered the smartest thing on the planet. He even invents time travel, which creates a weird bit of shenanigans for this entire series, because now not only does magic exist, science has came to the point where it can travel back in time, and he sees all of these ancient things, and he basically uses time travel to teach his son about history. Now, what's fun about Mr. Peabody and Sherman, however, is the dog actually challenges the government for the right to adopt a human. So this is basically the dog going, I want equal rights to you in that I would like to adopt a human and be responsible for a human. It is a complete role reversal for what we have seen. Now, him gaining this is a huge step for the animals, and I believe it actually leads to the next bit in this thing. We already have the smartest animal in the world. He has proven animals and humans are completely on the same path, and that basically just opens the door for the bad guys, where the bad guys are truly a group of animals. They are, but they are fully anthropomorphized, and there are humans in this world, but they just look at them as if they are just other humans. So what has happened here is thanks to the efforts of Barry B. Benson and Mr. Peabody, animals at this point have just gained complete rights. They are the exact same as humans. They can hold jobs, or more specifically, they can continue stealing from them. And all of this because of the fairy tale magic and powers and just these fairy tale creatures. Now you just have normal animals that are fully anthropomorphized, wearing clothes, and just full-fledged members of society. Now, some of them taking it the wrong way, admittingly, and the bad guys, that's what we see, but turning over a new leaf. But at this point, humans and animals, there really is no difference in this universe. They are just the same and together. Now, what this does lead us into, though, getting away from the animals, is it's pretty much the end of their story for now as far as modern times go. But where we can jump into is our next wave of things which happen in modern times. The fact that the fairy tale creatures do actually come back. I'd like to talk about this with the Rise of the Guardians, Abominable, Karen Gillan, Teenage Kraken, and Troll Hunters, Rise of the Titans. Now, in Rise of the Guardians, we see that basically in ancient times, God, the man on the moon, has decided that the dark times need to end. So he creates the Guardians. And the Guardians' job is to protect humans' light, the humans' magic within the children. As long as the children believe, they will continue to exist and they will continue to bring hope, wonder, memories, fun, all of these things that the Guardians represent to the world. So it's basically fairy tale creatures that are still within hiding, because we do see they all have their own little hideouts, still protecting the human race. And you can drop that into with Abominable, where they actually find an abominable snowman. So a fairy tale creature that has been hiding is now being found by humans. And we kind of roll that into Ruby Gilman Teenage Kraken, where this girl has found out that she's a Kraken and she just goes into the world. So now she's exposing the world to fairy tale creatures. It's basically this huge thing. But where the whole fairy tale uprising actually comes into play is in Troll Hunters Rise of the Titans. Now, this one is kind of a weird thing because it is a Netflix movie where you kind of need to watch Troll Hunters, Three Below, and Wizards, all on Netflix to really understand the whole events. That's kind of the big Avengers style team up of those three particular shows from Netflix. But essentially, give you guys a quick rundown. This is where a human gets chosen to be the next troll hunter. The troll hunter has historically just been a troll, and his job is to protect the troll world and Troll Town and those fairy tale creatures in that aspect. But a human gets chosen. And what ends up happening here is we get another alien invasion. So I'm sorry when I say three later on in this, I forgot about the aliens in Three Below. So this universe has actually been invaded by aliens 4 times. And it brings all of this actually out to the fray in the real world. And it ends with him kind of resetting the timeline. So I don't know if it really counts, but so up to that point, there would have been 4 alien invasions, but then he kind of just flips that around, so that may still not have happened. I don't know. That one's where it gets kind of confusing, but if you really want to look at it as is like this is the fairy tale creatures coming out, and that will actually set us up better for the monsters and the aliens and the superheroes, which is the next thing that we are going to talk about. What I like to call the alien invasion / rise of superheroes. And these two things kind of coincide with one another. Now, as I said before, the DreamWorks universe has been invaded by aliens not once, not twice, but on 3 completely separate occasions. But if you line them up, it sort of starts to make sense. So we'll start off this little timeline with our Monsters vs. Aliens. Now, in Monsters vs. Aliens, what we've seen is that the government has actually been keeping monsters basically in prison. And what that shows you is, one, at that probably where that falls into the timeline is still at the time when fairy tale creatures and monsters that have went into hiding, if they are found, they are then imprisoned, so that way the rest of the world does not know of their existence yet still. However, that will change in this movie when the first aliens invade the planet, and the government decides we need to call on the monsters, or these fairy tale creatures, with these special powers. And monsters is a very vague term. One of them is a man that got fused with a cockroach. But I think that's just another example of science reawakening fairy tale powers. And we have a human who gains powers through a meteorite by absorbing the power. But once again, I think that's just them activating fairy tale genes. It all honestly falls right into place with this. But the monsters go up against the aliens. The monsters ultimately become victorious, and the Earth is saved from its first alien invasion. But while that is going on, that actually sets up the timeline rather well for Megamind, as now the world is used to superhumans or superpowered people fighting off against aliens that have came to Earth. And that is basically the plot of Megamind. Megamind is an alien. Metro Man is also an alien, but also just basically you can consider him a superpowered individual. And they are just duking it out in Metro City, or Metrocity, as Megamind likes to call it. And this just seems to be kind of accepted by the town, and it's probably because that's just how it has been this entire time. But I mean, a blue kid going to school probably should have raised some red flags, or a kid that could fly probably should have raised some red flags, but not if you're already living in a world where superheroes are already fighting aliens. It's just going to kind of roll right into place, so they don't really think anything of it. But with the introduction of superheroes, you can roll right into Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, where these kids actually hypnotize their principal, and it's full blown hypnosis, which can be considered a superpower or magic. And by the end of it, he falls into this toilet, which basically is some form of technology, and the swirling ooze and stuff, which actually does infuse him and give him his actual superpowers, where every time they snap their fingers, he turns into Captain Underpants. Everybody just seems to be okay with this. Well, it's just a run of the mill thing. It's kind of, they're surprised that it happened, but not quite as surprised you would be in a world where that didn't just happen, but they have been conditioned to weird things happening in Monsters vs. Aliens and Megamind, so superpowered individuals are already just a thing. And this is, like I said, yet again, another example of technology reawakening fairy tale genes, dormant powers, dormant magic within the humans, and just bringing the humans back up to the fray. But where I think this also sort of leads us right into is the events of Home, where this is the third and final alien invasion, but the humans don't really do anything to stop it. I mean, it's kind of weird. I feel like they could. This would have been a perfect example to just go, well, hey, we've tried the monster, we've tried to having superheroes go after it, but they really just kind of leave that out. It really didn't fit into that particular story. But the humans don't really put up that big of a fight. They just kind of let it happen. And I get there was nothing really they could do, but also they might have just been kind of preconditioned to just go, oh, well, it's another alien invasion, so I guess we're just doing this now. And I think that is just a fun way to just kind of roll into it. But now that we've talked about the alien invasions, to get all that out of the way, the other one that I would really like to talk about in this is babies versus animals. And how I say that is essentially in the Boss Baby, we find out that babies have been in this weird kind of arms race style thing with animals and puppies and kittens and trying to make sure that the babies aren't left out because the animals are too cute, that humans don't want to have babies anymore. And they accomplish this by essentially drinking this potion, which makes the baby smart. It basically gives babies human or adult level intelligence and kind of beyond that. Now, we see this being used in both the Boss Baby and the Boss Baby family business. And across the events of those two things, what really all it does is it kind of just reinforces that humans are still trying to oppress animals. So this probably falls in way a little bit before in the animal timeline, before the animals really start just kind of attacking them legally, and that science can once again just recreate magic in humans. Now, all of that is essentially to just say that modern times in the DreamWorks world is insane. And it had so many things happen that it just is hardly even worth talking about. I do want to throw in here, this is where I would place Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. Now, this, I believe, is actually a movie about the claiming of the West from the Adventure Times, and you only actually see one person in a theater watching this movie. So I think it just shows that like some humans were very sympathetic towards animals and trying to support their cause, while others were still just trying to say, no, they are still just dumb animals. But I think that is actually a movie within the series, so I just felt like I needed to throw that there so it's mentioned. And you guys aren't gonna be like, well, he forgot Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, but it is there. It's just a movie about the events of them claiming the West in the exploration.
So to recap a little bit on where we left off, but realistically, what is the more important part of the modern times that really carries this world over into the future? And that is definitely the fact that in the bad guys, you see animals basically just walking around as just full-fledged members of society. There is no difference between animals and humans. Their fairy tale genes are active, their intelligence is back, and humans and animals are basically just one and the same, with no real differences among them. What makes this so interesting is we don't actually know what happens between the bad guys. Modern times, with all the different alien invasions, and the babies versus animals, and the animal uprisings, and them getting their chance, we don't really know what happens to actually kill off the humans, or even the superheroes, in fact. But what we do know is that anything that resembles a human has gone extinct, essentially. And we can really see this in Kung Fu Panda, Kung Fu Panda 2, Kung Fu Panda 3, and Kung Fu Panda 4, where there are no more humans left in the world. But you have a bunch of very sentient animals basically acting like humans. And not only acting like humans, but they've also rediscovered through, in Poe's case, and from what we've seen in Kung Fu Panda, through the power of Kung Fu and Qi and going into the spirit realm and all of these other things, they have actually managed to access human levels of magic. And not just fairy tale magics, though they are basically the culmination of human and fairy tale magic coming together in these what are essentially sentient animals that are just acting like humans. And that is a fundamental part of this, is we don't know what happened to the humans. It's probably more than likely what has happened is the animals just kind of outcompeted them. Once the animals' sentience came out and their intelligence came out and they gained this ability to be full-fledged members of society, they have technically had a way longer time to evolve and kind of mature and build up these things. But also just in a way, animals are better equipped to take over the planet if being put on the same level of humans than humans are. Animals are stronger, they are faster, they have poisons, they can fly, they have super strength, they can handle the magic of this world better than the humans can, and that has been shown throughout history within the Dreamworks universe. So eventually the humans did go extinct, and what we see here is the animals have basically taken over the planet. And now they've taken over the planet long enough for modern technology to essentially fall off, and for them to have kind of like a reawakening, or at least from what we see, it's not really modern technology being used by the animals. And maybe that's because they rejected it because that's what oppressed them for so long, or maybe they've just forgotten how to use it just from the sheer amount of time that it's been since the humans have fallen off. They still live in human-ish societies, but it's definitely not modern societies. So at some point the animals had taken over, probably had a little bit of a regression as far as technology goes, and then have basically like relearned technology all the way up to the point of what would be considered like, I would say like castle times, you know, like Iron Ages. Like they have steel and cannons, but they don't really have anything above that technology-wise. But that's really where we see the animals, and where we honestly, unfortunately, have to leave them off within their story. But what we now have seen is in this world, all of these things have come together, and that will eventually culminate in what I consider to be the farthest down the timeline of the Dreamworks universe, which is actually the Croods and the Croods A New Age. Now here, what we see are cavemen. And now you might be asking, okay, well, why did I put the cavemen at the end of the universe and not at the beginning of it? Well, that's because the world that we see in the Croods is very obviously not the world we would see with normal cavemen. They don't have normal animals. All of their animals are weird hybridized animals. They have giraffes mixed with elephants, T-Rexes mixed with anacondas, chickens mixed with fish, like they've got deer mixed with fireflies. And so all of these weird combined, really weirdly mutated animals that have just like been fused together to create these animals of the Croods time. And so that doesn't necessarily scream the past for me. That screams a future where something has happened to make all of the normal animals combined together. And what I think that was, to be honest with you, is the magic and the fairy tale genes, like we've been talking about prior to this. Something has happened within the animals and awakened these weird fairy tale genes where they've mixed up and mutated into these weird animal hybrids. But also what's happened throughout this is somewhere along the line the regular animals went extinct or evolved and had their fairy tale genes turn them into these new things that we're seeing in the Croods. But then what that basically did was it pretty much hit the reset button on the evolution. So what we're seeing in Croods and Croods New Age is actually the re-evolution of humans back into the Dreamworks world. In the Croods, what we're seeing is a group of what you would consider to be Neanderthal level humans, and then a group of modern humans, and them coming together. And scientifically, that is actually what has happened to us. A lot of us have Neanderthal genes within ourselves. A lot of us Homo sapiens. We are actually the hybrids of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. So Neanderthals realistically didn't go extinct. And that's actually what we kind of see happening in the Croods and the Croods A New Age, with Guy and Eve coming together. He's a normal human, she's a cave person, and they're coming together to try and survive this weird, brave new world. And this is very obviously not the same world that we would have grown up in. The fruit is gigantic. The animals, like I said, are very different. And I think the animals being different can also be attributed to the fact that this world has been invaded by aliens on 3 separate occasions, and it's had monsters and fairy tale creatures in it throughout its entire history, nearly, since God bestowed this power onto Moses way back in the Prince of Egypt. So if you take that and then years, millions of years of evolution all the way back in these, you would have these weird hybrid animals in this weird planet where it's like really rocky and then also really forested and these kinds of things. And you've now had the chance for cave people to re-evolve, essentially all the way up to what I would consider to be a Neanderthal level, and then taking it a step further, have human beings also re-evolve, bring that all the way up to Homo sapiens. So that to me is the final step within this Dreamworks universe, where we've had the rise of humans, the rise of magic, the rise of animals, the rise of fairy tale creatures, the rise of superheroes, battles between technology and science, magic, babies, dogs, cats, humans, fairy tale creatures, monsters, aliens, and all of these battles have ultimately accumulated into the world basically restarting itself with the re-evolution of humans in a world that has been so tainted that you get these weird animals all put together. And guys, I know this video wasn't quite as long as the last few, but there was a lot less to go over, and honestly, a quick video is probably the best way to end this. If you guys tune in next week, I'm going to upload just the full version of this, parts 1, 2, and 3 all put together, so you guys will have a chance to watch it start to finish. But until that comes out, if you guys can't wait, or I would much appreciate it if you guys would go back, watch part 1, watch part 2 to get yourself caught up, and watch this in part 3, and let me know, what did I miss, guys? Would you guys like for me to go more in depth into some of these movies, and to break some of these down, break down some of the characters, break down some of the points that I've made, and try and give you guys a little bit more background and more story to see if those actually could make more sense, or if I could flush it out just a little bit better. You guys let me know in the comments down below, and I will try and cover that in a later video. While you guys are down there in those comments, please remember to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you never miss another video from me. And until that next video, guys, I will see you in another video.